Wonderful. Okay, so I'll be presenting a little bit of a case study from one of our partners, and that partner here at Trueface is Field Control Analytics. I'll get into who they are, what it is that we've done for them, and to what benefit. So advancing critical infrastructure security with biometrics, that was me using some puffery to basically say that we're using biometrics and facial recognition to increase security, in this case, at job sites. And those are construction sites. But what is critical infrastructure? They have the same type of security measures as construction sites do, and if not, to a higher degree. So we think about corporate and government buildings, we think about banks, utilities, power plants, landmarks. All of these locations have a high level of security because they're protecting somebody. So the people who are going through these buildings and or going into these structures have not only a responsibility to present themselves and present their identity, because in many cases there's heavy machinery around, and if they don't have the proper training, OSHA, for example, accidents can happen. So being able to present their identities, but also do so in a way that doesn't hinder the ability for lots and lots, and in some cases hundreds or thousands of people to enter a site at the same time. So quickening that process of self-identification and making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. So we'll start with Field Control Analytics, our partner. So who is Field Control Analytics? Essentially, they're a services firm, specifically for construction sites. And what that means is that they're providing kind of the soup to nuts for onboarding of workers. If a general contractor has a project, say he wants to build a library, that general contractor has 10, 15, 20 subcontractors. Each of those subcontractors might have 10 or 15 employees that are working full-time on this project, on the library, possibly part-time. Every single one of those workers, so we're talking hundreds at this point, has to be onboarded. They have to, in some cases, be drug tested. They have to be badged. They have to be, their certifications have to be tracked, and then their badges are used to let them in onto the job site. And those badges are then used to track and control the number of hours they worked, and that information gets passed back up to the general contractor for payment at the end of the week or the 2 weeks. So you can imagine that there's a lot of room for error within that entire process, it's not necessarily unique to Field Control Analytics, but really the construction industry at large. I've talked briefly about what are these types of problems that can occur, and I'll get into it a little bit more detail here. So there's definitely issues with worker badging and access control. So when we think about a worker who has come onto the job site, maybe he's forgotten his badge that day and he asks his friends. We call that's in the industry, it's called buddy punching. Forgot the badge at home, just kind of knows the security guard, sneaks through the door, and is then let out. These can create what's known as gaps in the industry, which ends up being a cost accounting nightmare for the general contractor or the owner of the building, the people who are holding the bag for the building to be built. So that ends up causing arguments and disputes. And if my record shows that worker A was only here for 4 hours because, in fact, he forgot his badge upon entry, but the subcontractor is saying, no, he works 12 hours, and you extrapolate that over hundreds of workers, it becomes a real issue that creates forecasting issues for further projects. It also creates bidding issues, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong from just a simple process as ingress into a secure site. So they came to us and with the idea that facial recognition and computer vision could help. And So we talked about how computer vision solutions can really help this industry, this ingress and egress problems. So one of the ways that computer vision can help is adding a factor of authentication. So a single factor authentication, for those on the call who probably do know, but just for everybody's benefit, single factor is your PIN number on your credit card. Multi-factor is adding another biometric, another additive to your password. So adding a single or multi-factor authenticator onto cameras or ingress points really helps. So being able to verify that the person who's presenting themselves as Mason Allen is indeed Mason Allen and not someone else. So that's one way. Person of interest recognition is another. Identifying people who shouldn't be on site is something that in several instances, whether that be somebody who was a disgruntled worker, somebody who's coming on to steal valuable construction materials. So that's another one. And then if we talk also about spoof detection, if for instance, somebody was able to, if Austin Rains, for example, he would never do this, but if he wanted to present himself as Mason Allen to go work 12 hours at some construction site, and he had a picture of me, and all there was a camera to let him in, he could ideally present himself and get away with it. But something that we work on here at Trueface, spoof detection, and here's a little video here of it. This is our CTO, Nazar Chafney. So the ability to detect whether or not something that is being presented to a camera is real or fake. Obviously has much more value in locations that are not manned versus manned or secure or like highly trafficked sites. So to talk about the implementation that we had with field control analytics. So our technical team integrated both our SDK and mobile SDK, the mobile piece being so that they could allow the same type of infrastructure to happen, the granting of access via facial recognition with a mobile reader. And actually you can see it in this photo. So these are field control analytics turnstiles at a construction site in Las Vegas. And these here are the cameras themselves. So worker comes up to the camera, identifies himself, he puts an RFID badge. That's the first factor in this case. Second factor is facial recognition being run. And upon a positive association, he's allowed through the building and to work. So what does that look like? In essence, what I just described is this. And you'll see how seamless it is. But what this really comes down to, and everything that I've just discussed for the past 15, 20 minutes, is an enhanced level of security via computer vision, specifically facial recognition in this case. So the leveled up security is one factor. The second is increased safety. And we talk about critical infrastructure. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of areas for concern when it comes to safety. So being able to make sure that people who have OSHA certification to run, a wrecking ball are the right ones using it, or else problems can arise, accidents can happen, insurance cost goes up, not to mention sometimes lives injured or lost. So there's a lot of issues that can go wrong with allowing the wrong people onto job sites. And something that we've spoken with our partners about in terms of future consideration is there are areas where construction sites where a turnstile isn't necessarily the best option because of a footprint. Maybe the office is, maybe it's a remodel inside of an office building. So we've talked about creating single factor authentication, not even needing an RFID card, and just identifying and workers with their faces. So all of that authentication can happen on camera, hours tracked can happen that way at ingress and egress points. And that goes back into accelerated onboarding. As I mentioned at the beginning, field control analytics is doing everything from, onboarding these people all the way through taking their photos, social security numbers, drug tests. All of that can be condensed and help them kind of create better efficiencies in their processes. Finally, I'll leave this quote up. I won't read it, but it's a nice validation from our client of the efficacy of the technology. So if I'm not sure if there's any questions.